Thanks a lot for joining. It's a pleasure to have you here. We have this XgridTalks. We bring in a top expert GTM leaders, and we talk about everything which is GTM. So just a bit about yourself, and it's very interesting to note that you actually started your career with computer engineering, and then now you are actually building revenue engines. What was this transition like, and why did that happen?
Yeah, so I started as a engineer at a company that I started with some college friends where we were building retail analytics technology. And we were
Mm-hmm.
actually building hardware. We were building cameras that we were installing in retail stores to do things like count traffic and analyze traffic patterns throughout stores, which was incredibly fun. And I look back on that time with a lot of fondness. But that team really had no commercial experience or ability to really go to market in the way that I know how to today. So after that company shut down during COVID, I ended up working at a friend's company doing operations for them. And I transitioned into a growth role and just really enjoyed it. It was a developer tools company, so we were still selling to the persona that I knew the best, which was engineers. And we were able to grow the user base of that tool extremely significantly. And that tool was eventually acquired by ClickHouse. And so after that happened, I was looking around a little bit for maybe what would be interesting next. And the problem with that company was that we really didn't have significant revenue growth. And so my next company was a cloud cost management tool that could, for example, allow you to save money on AWS. And I was the first marketing hire there. And at that company, I got to actually drive pipeline and sort of build some of the early maybe GTM engineering systems that we all know and love today. And so I started using Clay a couple months into that role and really fell in love with it. I developed these plays that worked super well. We automated everything with Clay. And I got so deep into the product that the Clay founders eventually reached out to me, and kind of the rest is history. So I've made the full transition from engineering to sales, basically, but it's been with a lens of a real kind of technical focus on the technology and the product and the sort of engineering aspect of go-to-market.
Okay, that's awesome. So let's just get to this GTM engineering part
Yeah.
at this moment right now. So there are functions like RevOps and growth and marketing ops and all of those existed. Then this term came up, GTM engineering, and which is actually transforming every GTM motion at this point. So just maybe for the viewers, just talk about what GTM engineering is and what exactly are the essential components of that particular system.
So the idea behind GTM engineering is that you're going to treat your go-to-market like a product, in the sense that you're going to design and build it and iterate on it. You're going to have releases. You're going to have analytics that tell you how well it's working. And you're going to treat it more or less like a system that can be coded and designed versus perhaps a more opaque thing that is more about like human process. And so go-to-market engineers are the people that automate and operate the tools that run a go-to-market strategy that is based on those ideas. And so a go-to-market engineer typically has like a lot of deep experience with different APIs. They typically know their way around Salesforce really well. They know how to think in sort of an if then this then that way. And the best go-to-market engineers are able to actually take these more opaque and kind of loosely defined go-to-market motions and codify them into systems and tools that run the motion or help run the motion. And so it's kind of an emerging role that sits alongside ops typically. And there are folks that are probably some of the most like technically advanced go-to-market people out on the market right now. I think the thing that has made it really successful in the last 2 years or so has been the emergence of AI. And so much of go-to-market is kind of qualitative decision-making. And what's happened is that within these flows or within these systems, you're able to allow and prompt models to make some of the decisions that were formerly made by people. So for example, a very basic one would be like an inbound SDR. You used to rely on people to qualify your leads coming in. Now that entire thing can be kind of fully automated. But still, once you do that, a GTM engineer needs to build it. They need to often maintain it, adjust it, iterate on it. And so that role has kind of become pretty critical to a lot of companies that are thinking about their go-to-market as a real system that can be engineered and designed.
Okay, so how come? So this is what right now is in the market, that GTM engineering pretty much equals like working with clay. So is this correct, or is this something which people are sort of like misrepresenting?
I think it's closely associated with clay, and I think clay has done a lot to kind of coin the term and popularize it. But I think it describes a more general set of tasks around automation and iteration. And clay as a product is kind of built for those two things. Our first customers were cold outbound agencies, which needed basically cheap access to data and the ability to rapidly launch new campaigns and experiments. And the fundamentals of clay remain oriented around those two things. And go-to-market engineering is a sort of, as a role, has a lot of those elements inside of it. That said, there are many other pieces of software on the market that I think someone could use, and you could create an entire go-to-market engineering stack that probably doesn't involve clay if you really try. I think the things that you need a place where you can experiment and rapidly try new things. You need an ability to acquire data. Go-to-market is based in many parts on having like really good access to data. And then, pardon me. And then you need an ability to connect systems together and automate things. And so there are many kind of workflow automation tools out there. There are many different data providers. I think clay is probably the happy marriage of a lot of those elements, but it's something that is broader than clay. And I could imagine a go-to-market engineering stack that actually didn't involve clay.
Yeah, so let's just talk about the stack. So if let's just consider an early stage startups, and they are setting up their GTM engineering motion. So how would they think about building that stack? What are the basic infra components that needs to be there to make it work?
Yeah, you're going to need like a few things. One is you need a system of record. And so most people are going to look for a CRM for this, HubSpot or Salesforce. Some teams are starting to use data warehouses for this. Some enterprise teams actually do most of their data enrichment work in data warehouses, but you need a place to store the data. Clay is really not a place where you would store lots of data. Secondly, you need the ability to perform enrichments. And so you need the tools that allow you to take, for example, a domain and add the revenue and the funding and the type of business it is and all of that stuff. Third of all, you need a system that allows you to take action. So you need somewhere that you can send emails, send messages, send LinkedIn requests, where you can generate content and so forth. And then fourth of all, you need an analytics engine. So some place that is actually recording the activity that is happening. So recording sales calls, recording emails, making that available in kind of your system of record. So you need those four things in order to kind of build a go-to-market engineering practice. And then of course, there's lots of niche tools that you could layer on top of that, but those four would be kind of the main ones. And so, common stack would be Salesforce, Clay, and Gone. Or another stack might be like HubSpot, Outreach, Gone, and N8N. Or you can imagine some variations of that, but you need those four components in order to kind of do the work. Our strategy at Clay is to provide the data marketplace, so 150 data providers that you can buy data from directly in Clay, plus the workflow and automation side, and then a little bit of the place where you can take action. We now have a sequencer in Clay, but most Clay customers are going to still have some type of sequencer or dialer or LinkedIn automation software that they use, and they're going to orchestrate that software with Clay. So we are kind of trying to be two of the four components. And then we're also trying to be flexible for people that might want to only use us for one of the four components or half of a component or something, and they might want to do other things in their stack. And because we are a orchestration tool and a workflow tool, we try really hard to be able to connect and work nicely with everything else out there so that folks can kind of flexibly make decisions about their stack.
Okay, so obviously in all of this the signals play a huge role, and the quality of signals pretty much determine how good your GTM workflow is working or not. So how do you decide that, okay, these signals actually matter and these don't? Do you have sort of like a way of decoding that?
Yeah, absolutely. There are two types of signals that we see in the market. One are what we call somewhat like branded signals. These are things that you can buy from many places. You can buy what we call people movement, which is job changers, new hires and promotions. You can get website intent data, which is de-anonymizing IP addresses. You can get product reviews and news. You can get sort of like people searching review sites data from G2 or Trust Radius or Bombora. And so there's lots of these kind of types of signals that you can get. And most companies are going to run some of these or test them and so forth. But there's another type of signal that I think is actually more helpful, which is like a custom signal that is based on something that's unique to the business. And so what we try to help customers with at Clay is to help them think creatively about what type of knowledge they would need to have about an account to know that an account is ready to buy. And then we try to actually implement that in Clay. And so, for example, we have customers that are pulling like FAA violations for their accounts. We have customers that are monitoring social media accounts and looking for specific types of posts. We have customers that are tracking like website changes and understanding when someone adds a new AI feature to their product. There's many types of signals that you can build that are more unique to your business, and the best signals that I've seen are ones that are that fit that definition, and typically there are ones that the company has been able to iterate on over time. And so, for example, when you buy job changers data, you don't really iterate on it that much. It's like you didn't have it before and now you have it. When you're developing your own custom signals, you can make tweaks to that signal over time to tailor it to the exact type of moment that you think is important in your kind of sales process. And if you're able to iterate towards that signal and have a kind of a culture and a process where you can get feedback from the field on the signals that you're providing to them, where you can run campaigns based off of those signals and track the open rates and reply rates, then you can kind of successfully iterate into something which is going to be much more successful than everything else. And so normally what I see is, you should always run something like a job changers campaign. That's a tried and true way to kind of gain revenue. So, when you have champions move from one business to another, you should know about that. But then on top of that, you should run a series of unique signals that you're always checking for that will allow you to know when someone is uniquely in the market for your product.
Okay, that's awesome. So obviously you've worked with quite a few different clients. Maybe you want to share some of the use cases where the GTM teams have deployed Clay. They went from a certain tool or manual process to Clay, and there was a lot of like obviously maybe speed and quality and performance change. So maybe if you can just tell us some of the examples that would actually help us out.
Yeah, like there's a lot of flashy things with Clay, but actually the first thing customers do with this is they work on their data quality. I feel that most companies are not very happy with their data quality. That's kind of a universally understood problem. And so that's a big problem because it means that you can't actually build some of the automated things that you might want to build on top of very poor data. So I'll give you some of my favorite examples are a company like Plaid. So the first thing they did with Clay is they filled in all of the sub-industries on their accounts. And so they have like 70 different sub-industries of ways that they look at their market. So, for Plaid, they have banking platforms, they have debt collection platforms, they have sort of like, fintech infrastructure, they have crypto, they have all these different types of businesses that make up Plaid's market. But if you go to LinkedIn or you go to ZoomInfo, you go to somewhere else and you look at the industry classification on those businesses, it's all going to say like telecommunications and internet or something. And that's not very useful if you're doing things like running marketing campaigns or you're building balanced books of business. And so the very first task that Plaid did is they filled in all of the sub-industries of all of their accounts based on their specific view of the market. And that's kind of the first step towards saying, okay, I've actually begun to customize what I'm doing based on everybody else, based on like insights that I have about my market and the types of products that I sell. And so that example is kind of true like across the board. Almost every Clay customer is going to start with some sort of data quality issue. Another one that I really like is Vanta was expanding into Australia. And so when you are expanding into new regions, you typically need a base level of data to understand what are the top companies that are a good fit for me, what are the top contacts, how do I get their information. But usually for companies, that means procuring some type of data provider that is something that they have to test and evaluate, and they have to go through this long negotiation, and it can be a multi-month process right at the time when you are trying to hit the ground running in a new region. Well, for Vanta, Clay already has Australian data providers. We have a data provider called Firmable, which has 10 million Australian contacts, million businesses, phones, and emails. And so for them, expanding into Australia and New Zealand was a matter of adding Firmable into their enrichment workflow in Clay, which took probably took less than an hour for them to do. And so they can just kind of check that box on their Australian rollout plan and get going, super quickly. And so data quality globally, data quality as it relates to your business, these are all the things that customers kind of get started with right away. After that, folks get to automation. And a lot of customers come in with something like a longer speed to lead process on their inbound funnel than they'd like. Or they come in with a outbound workflow where the first few steps of which account, which contact, and what message can be automated. And so actually Figma is a good example of a customer which was spending far too long getting back to customers that had submitted some kind of inbound form. And there's multiple reasons for that. A big reason is they might not trust their qualification criteria enough to actually do it automatically. They might send it to a human to allow the human to look at it. And so with Clay, they were able to build a inbound flow which did all the enrichment work that they were interested in, including some very unique types of data points that are specific to Figma. And from there, get back to the lead almost immediately. And so that's going to be a lot of the types of work that companies are going to do initially with Clay. In some cases, companies will do kind of net new things that really are only possible with AI. So Waste Management is a Clay customer. They are a national kind of waste disposal company. They are known for these green dumpsters that they have outside of different businesses. And so a data point that they developed with Clay was to use an agent in Clay to go use Google Street View and go to a business and actually evaluate what color dumpster was outside of the business. And if it was not a green dumpster, they knew that that was a potential prospect for them that they could add to their database. And so those are a couple examples of data work and automation work that Clay customers are doing. And then from there, you can get into these more what I would describe as agentic GTM workflows, which are kind of fully automated, always on pipeline generation and data cleaning workflows. But more often than not, folks will start with some type of data problem or automation problem and begin to kind of build that out in Clay.
Okay, so you've done this research and you've done this data enrichment. Obviously, then comes the emailing part or the actual when you start running those flows. And the first thing obviously comes is the personalization and personalization at scale. So how does Clay play a role over here, or is it like Clay not that?
No, we do.
Okay.
Currently in Clay, we do personalized multi-touch sequences, and so we don't really today handle like replies. We don't necessarily do like turn-based messaging. We don't do things like we don't necessarily automatically evolve the messaging based on responses. These are all kind of either capabilities that are available from partners that work with Clay, like Octave or Autobound or Scribe or Twain, or these are capabilities that are just kind of like net new in the market that it's not really clear if they're kind of fully working yet, and we might need additional versions of the big models to kind of get them to work. But for the stuff that Clay does, what we will do is provide an ability to create basically a personalized sequence or cadence for a contact. So everything from the first email to the second LinkedIn request to the talk track that an SDR might make when they make a phone call, all of that can be personalized based on the data that's enriched in Clay. And then we orchestrate it. So we'll send it to Gone or SalesLoft or Apollo or Outreach, where the message can be configured to be sent automatically. It can be configured in draft mode, where a sales rep might review it or edit it before they send it. But the content of the message, the account, the person we're contacting, why we're going after them, that is all kind of data enrichment that is done in Clay, and then we will orchestrate those results through these other platforms. Optionally, there actually is now a sequencer in Clay that you can use, but it's really for kind of pretty limited use cases where you just need to go from 0 to 1 on sending emails out like immediately. And so mostly what Clay customers do is they will do the messaging piece in Clay, and then they will send it to other platforms for the actual execution.
Okay, so okay, that's awesome. So in a way, we have identified the right person and maybe the right message, and maybe then the question comes of the right time. Okay, and again, it can be based on so many signals out there. The person himself interacting with your company website or doing
Yeah.
some dark search out there, or so how does the right timing? How do you play over there?
Yeah, the misconception with signals is the idea that once a signal is generated, you're going to either reach out to them immediately, or you're going to like tag a sales rep and say, hey, look, this account visited this web page. It's the kind of thing that seems like it would work at a small scale where if you have 1 or 2 accounts, but when you're monitoring tens of thousands of accounts, you just either end up flooding customers with irrelevant messaging, or you end up flooding sales reps with notifications that they ultimately ignore. So my advice to customers is to keep signals and intent where it belongs at the top of the funnel, and use it as a way to measure the heat score in some ways of the account. And so what we do at Clay is we look at about a dozen different signals on our target accounts to understand what types of campaigns we should run against them. So if someone has liked a piece of organic content on LinkedIn, if they've interacted with an ad, if they've attended an event with our founder, if they've visited the website, if they've connected with one of our GTM engineers, if they've replied to an outbound email, these are all signals that we will actually use to create a composite score on the account. And as the account score increases, it will move them into different stages of our funnel where we will run increasingly personalized campaigns. So I think that is probably the best thing to do with signals. The other thing you can do with signals is continue to focus on your top of funnel. So now in Clay, for example, you can create ad audiences directly in LinkedIn from Clay. And so as you're seeing accounts start to visit your website or interact with your organic content, I would then move them into an ad audience where you can run ads against them and use those ads to further warm them up so that you can begin outbounding them either in an automated fashion or with your with your sales reps. And so I would not generally be using, like, there's this idea of like signals-based outbound. I think the best way to do that is to actually use the signals as a measurement of what's working well, instead of using the signal as a reason to go reach out to the company right away. I think the other thing to kind of keep in mind with signals is that you still want to really factor in who is your target persona. And so in a lot of cases, an account will be generating signals, but people will skip the step of actually applying their ICP criteria to the contacts on that account. And so an example of this is like person level de-anonymization on a website. How this works is, like, let's say like an engineer from another company visits Clay's website. At a very naive level, we might de-anonymize that web visit and then send the engineer an email. Well, the engineer is not in Clay's ICP. Clay serves RevOps and marketing ops and CROs and so forth. And so if an engineer is visiting Clay's website, we might kind of like tally that up as a signal, but we're going to wait until the account is in a hot or warming up state before we are actually going to send some outbound to our true ICP contacts. And we're never going to kind of lose sight of the fact that even if other people at the account are interacting with Clay, our focus is still on who we've identified as our kind of ICP persona. So I think a good signals program encompasses all of those things. And, it's never a problem to kind of run campaigns against a signal, especially if there's a signal that you feel is, really strong. An example of that might be like, whenever a customer launches a new AI product, you can bet that they're using one of the large model providers underneath the hood to power that. And so if your offering kind of goes side by side with a large model provider, that might actually be an example of a campaign that you'd want to run. But that is like a demand gen task. I would actually separate that from the marketing and strategic task of how do you leverage signals within your go-to-market.
So how would the organizations look like moving forward? I mean, because I see there's a lot of still you need to build these very sophisticated deep plays. Okay, do you want to run ads, or do you want to take the traffic from audience from this tool to this tool, and then maybe retargeted them in via ads or via outbound play and all of that. So do you foresee that Clay will be giving some sort of templates? Okay, this industry, this person, this ICP, this kind of messaging, this is your play.
Yes and no. I still
Mhm.
do think that like I would challenge go-to-market teams to kind of develop their own views on what campaigns are going to work well and who is their ICP. I still think that's the best way to get results, is to have kind of a like first principles point of view on those things. We obviously do provide templates for different types of enrichments. There's like hundreds of different Clay templates, and we call them playbooks, that you can use and set up for different types of campaigns. But I would use those more as like models of what you could do, or kind of ideas of what you could do, versus necessarily taking that and directly turning that into something that you would use. The one exception to this, I think, is on the data enrichment side. I do believe there are some very standard data enrichment workflows that basically every company should be running. Things like getting your employee counts right, getting your account hierarchies right, getting your industry classifications correct, adding in some AI data points that are a fit for your business. Those are all tasks that I think everybody should do. Same thing for contacts. Everybody should be waterfalling their phone numbers, validating their emails, tracking job changers, and ensuring that titles are correct and current like workplaces are correct. If you're running direct mail as well, you're doing more like events and field marketing type activities, you need to ensure the locations of everybody is well understood, so that you have the correct account corporate HQ, and that you have the correct sort of person location for where that person works, because a lot of people work remote or in satellite offices now. So we do provide templates for all those things, but I think a lot of the best campaigns I've seen are, they might be derivative of some template, but they are actually pretty unique to that business. And that is, in my opinion, how you begin to build an edge in the market, is by having an ability to repeatedly run an experiment with unique plays that only make sense for that type of business. So yeah, I think this is actually a big part of the GTM engineering movement at Clay, and how we try to work with customers is we try to actually brainstorm some of those things with them and be a sounding board for saying, oh yeah, you can do that in Clay, or that's not quite possible, or whatever it is.
And also, so one other question, I think this is an interesting one, because there are quite a few competitors who are actually like trying to become like Clay, or maybe they're adding more and more options to their product suite. So for example, Apollo, they've launched like outbound, inbound, CRM, and everything within all of that. So how is Clay thinking about it? I mean, and there's this HubSpot was like, okay, they are also trying to like clayification of something of
Yep.
yeah, something going on over there. So how are you guys thinking about all of these moves?
We're just not big believers in the like all-in-one platform. We're trying to provide building blocks for folks to kind of build their own versions of these platforms internally, and or extend the functionality of these platforms is actually the more common case. So, data enrichment is a great example here. There's a core data set that you need for that there are various providers that you can get that from. Some of the most successful data enrichment, though, is stuff that's pretty unique to the company. It's unique to the motion, unique to the ICP, unique to how they sell, unique to the product. And I think that the thing that's been successful for Clay is giving folks the ability to provide, to build some of these things for themselves, versus needing to buy a bunch of kind of like one-off products and stitch them together in some way. And so I think we continue to lean into that. The future of a lot of this stuff is maybe more technical ops teams, which are building more of their own tools themselves. But I don't necessarily think that means they are coding those tools. I think they're using a platform like Clay, which has a bunch of primitives to build that. I'll give you an example. There are some companies that do kind of inbound lead routing through Clay. And so do we provide an inbound lead routing module? No. But do we provide like a round robin action? Yes. And do we provide like a weighted round robin action? Yes. Do we provide an ability to look up records in Salesforce? Yes. Send emails? Yes. Create lead scores? Yes. So you've got these primitives that you can use to create a inbound lead routing solution in Clay. And we just think that like go-to-market is increasingly technical, increasingly specialized, and And these teams need sort of more powerful tools versus simpler tools in order to build some of these flows for themselves.
Okay, and now there's a concept of content engineering that's coming up, and there are quite a few tools that are really getting attention and getting traction also. So, are you sort of like trying to work with them also, or is it something which is an
Yeah,
independent
you're
choice?
referring to tools that allow you to like publish web pages or slide decks or things like that.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so Clay, for example, integrates with Webflow. We integrate with HubSpot, CMS. We integrate with Google Slides and Notion, and actually a number of tools that are maybe more geared around content creation. It's actually one of the number one use cases that we're using Clay for internally. It's not as common in our customer base right now, just because it is, I would say, a little bit more of a build out. You know, if you're creating 1,000 slide decks, you got to be really dialed in on the fact that all those decks are going to look good, the graphics are going to make sense, the copy makes sense, and so forth. And so it's more of a precise thing. But we do have a lot of customers that, for example, run ABM workflows where they are sending people to personalized landing pages, and those work super well. And Clay is kind of increasing the places where you can build that stuff. I think also like the new ability to send ad audiences to Clay, that kind of portends a future where you can actually create ads in Clay and do things like that. So I think content creation is a super fruitful and super ripe place. And we've also, I think, made good strides in supporting some of the content creation APIs that are available. So, you know, all the major image models, some of the like video generation models, those are interesting things that are available in Clay. One of my favorite tools that I saw recently allows you to send, you know, handwritten notes in quotes to different customers and then actually send them by email. So we're really excited about all that stuff. You know, I think, for example, HeyGen is an integration in Clay, and I think those tools are actually the kind of edge of the creativity that you can develop. And of course, if you get a sort of good prompt going that creates a personalized video for a customer in a one-off fashion, then it probably makes sense to try to do that for as many of your customers as you can at the same time. And Clay is kind of the tool to do that step too.
Okay, that's awesome. So let's just get into a situation and think of a founder, early stage, trying to set up their outbound campaigns. And obviously, there's so many tools, there's so many data stuff that's out there. So how would they set up their GTM engineering motion? What's expected in like first 90 days for them?
So the very first step is to feel good about your data quality. You really cannot build automated workflows without strong data, and you can't go ahead and orchestrate other tools on behalf of your reps without the ability to make decisions about what accounts are qualified, if the contact data is correct, all of that. So you need to start with high quality data. You actually don't need a GTM engineer to do this. I think this is a common misconception. Almost every RevOps or sales ops team that I talk to is well equipped to improve their data quality and make good strides there. And actually, the funny thing about improving your data quality is usually, like, you could just stop there. Oftentimes, if you improve the foundational data within your motion, you can just continue to run your motion and it'll work better than it was before. But typically what companies want to do once they feel good there is they want to begin to automate things. And so I actually think that automating within the sales process itself is a great first target. The initial use cases I like to start with customers on are things like pre-call meeting notes, post-call follow-ups, Salesforce stage change automations, signals digest for reps. Those are all use cases that are relatively. I mean, it's a little bit more of a build out in Clay, but they are use cases that kind of make an impact to the day-to-day of the sales rep right away. The inbound setup is a great place to start as well once you have foundational data quality. And then outbound, I think, is a little more interesting. The way to think about outbound with Clay is that Clay is a targeting tool more than it is like a email spam tool. And so actually what we find is Clay customers tend to send fewer emails with Clay than they did before. And that's because the scoring of the accounts and the ranking of the contacts and the ability to create, buying committees is just so much more precise than what a lot of folks kind of had working within their systems before. But you have to make some real decisions with outbound. And so when you're thinking about outbound, I actually do recommend people take a look at some of these Clay agencies out there. Outbound is about the targeting. It's also about the technical infrastructure that you have. So if you don't have the ability to monitor your domain health, spin up new domains, rotate inboxes, warm them up, these are all capabilities that someone on the team or potentially someone external needs to do. And because a lot of those tasks are more like services-oriented tasks, I actually think that an outbound agency or a third party is a great fit for this. And of course, outbound by its nature mostly doesn't work. It occasionally works super well. And so if you are trying to iterate on it, having an agency that you trust that can run lots of experiments at the same time is really a nice thing. And so if I was setting up a company from scratch and setting up a go-to-market motion, I would probably have a RevOps leader, a go-to-market engineer, and a Clay agency all kind of in the mix in order to run like a modern motion. But that said, I still think that the order of operations is to address the data quality first and foremost. And to do that, you really don't need any of that other stuff. You just need folks that are sort of committed to creating high quality data. So that would be some thoughts on how to structure things initially.
How would you structure the how would you structure the experimentation part? Because there are quite a few things that early stage will be figuring out. Is the ICP is there, is the right messaging is there, or all of that stuff. So how does Clay help with that, or is it maybe Clay is a bit later stage?
The experimentation part is super important. And Clay's kind of built for this. It's built to run these different campaigns that you run at a smaller scale, and then when something's working, you can apply a lot more credits to it and scale it up. And so the consumption model really drives at that. The way to think about it is the way that is to kind of mirror what happens in actual product development. So you have release cycles. Maybe you do 2-week sprints. You have goals. You have things that you're going to publish, and then you have analytics that's going to tell you if the reception to that new feature or product was good or not. And so if you structure your go-to-market sprints in kind of 2-week sprints where you say, here's the campaigns that we're going to run, and then you publish those, let the team know about them, and then you measure the results, then that allows you to get into a cycle of kind of iterating quickly. And the fun thing about go-to-market is there's lots of things you can iterate on. You can choose different accounts. You can choose different signals, different contacts, different messaging, different channels. There's many ways that you can adjust and tweak the campaigns. And a lot of times the difference between a campaign that's successful and one that's not is only a few basis points of conversion. So it might be the difference between 6 meetings versus 10 meetings, right? And so the little tweaks that you make in these campaigns can actually make make a huge difference. The thing that some teams miss a little bit on this is they don't actually have the kind of feedback from the campaigns that they run in order to make changes. And so if you're not in a culture of kind of launching things and then seeing how they work and then iterating on it, you might not actually get to this sort of like magical set of data or a set of messaging that's going to work the best. And so that's the part that I think is the part that I see missing the most from these teams. And that's the thing that we're going to have a little bit more to share on how we're thinking about that with Clay in the near future.
So tell us about, you mentioned about agents and agentic workflows. Yeah, just elaborate those. How do they work, and what's the premise behind this?
So on the scale of kind of automation, I actually like Zapier's framework here. They start with basically individuals writing prompts, then they get into like workflow automation, then they get into agentic workflows, and then finally agents are kind of like the final boss. So I think where we are in the industry today is we are working with agentic workflows. It's actually more rare to have full-blown agents that are doing meaningful work. There's a lot of hype around AI SDRs, for example. There's a lot of hype around potentially these types of agents that might like join sales calls and answer technical questions. In my view, we are not seeing those things work in a super real way as of yet, but I think we will potentially get there. What we are seeing work is this phase 3 of agentic workflows, where within the workflow there is a lot of AI logic inside of it. There are prompts and decisions that are made. there's often like a closed loop thing happening where the agentic workflow can kind of decide to, make different decisions and so forth, and it can decide to kind of like write different messaging based on new signals that come up. But the workflow is grounded in actual like if then else statements. It's grounded in like data from Clay's third-party marketplace versus data that's scraped off the web, and it's kind of grounded in these like real things. And then crucially, each step of that agentic workflow is actually designed by a human and oftentimes kind of monitored by a human. And so you are not going to see typically an agentic workflow which is automatically adjusted by the agent. A human is going to go in and kind of monitor the performance and make changes. That's different than stage 4, which is a full-on agent, which is able to kind of modify itself over time and just kind of exist out there in the world. And so I think agentic workflows are the thing for the next, certainly through 2026. But beyond that, it does seem like some of the capabilities that are coming out, including like things like memory, longer context windows, more ability to reason. Those ingredients will help us build actually full-on agents. And I think, we're thinking about that at Clay. Everybody in the industry is sort of waiting for that, but it's not something that I would go into a customer today and kind of pitch with a degree of certainty that it's actually going to deliver value to their business.
So how do you foresee the evolution of like the buyer, like the person who's actually just receiving those emails, and
Yeah.
it is just like getting flooded, conversion rates going down?
Yeah. So it's an arms race, right? Because a lot of people, including myself, are now using LLMs to filter their inboxes too. And so it's LLMs talking to LLMs. The thing that I think is going to make the difference here is being able to capture the personalization aspect of it, not only in the message, but also how the outreach is done. And so something I've been excited about, for example, is the ability to potentially orchestrate like iMessage or WhatsApp on behalf of sales reps, the ability to use Clay to do more in-person events and host high-quality dinners and things like this, the ability to send physical gifts to people and do more highly scaled direct mail campaigns. Those are things that I think are more likely to break through. I would agree with you that email as a channel, I think cold email is something that is really tough to do. You can do it if you have the right setup, but the best email campaigns are typically after there's been some amount of warming that's been done on the account or the contact. And so, yeah, so I'm kind of very bullish here, but I think that the types of orchestration that we'll do will actually move kind of from email more into LinkedIn DMs, Slack DMs, iMessage, WhatsApp, some of the places where there's still a lot of like human selling that's going on. But given how this industry develops, those places won't be like sacrosanct for long. I think people will actually use AIs as part of that, and AIs will actually do things like send iMessages on behalf of people. But it'll be done in a way that I think is not. We will hopefully learn some lessons from what happened with email, where it will be sort of like a higher trust type platform, or you potentially won't get in touch with people until they've been warmed up sufficiently within your kind of top of funnel.
Okay, that's awesome. So, so is there anything that I've missed? Anything that you want to add, and I've maybe skipped that?
One thing I'm really excited about with Clay is a new feature that we have called Sculptor. This is actually like a chat agent that you can use inside Clay to build your tables. I think we've done a lot of work to make the technology super flexible and super powerful, but we have still more work to do to make it more accessible. And I think Sculptor is one of the first things that I've seen that actually makes Clay accessible to a bigger range of users. You can almost envision a world where potentially sales reps are able to chat with their Clay data in kind of a nice way. Speaking of that, the other thing I'm excited about actually are rep interfaces. I think that companies are increasingly building their own rep interfaces. They're vibe coding them. They're using internal tools. I can't share much on our plans here for this as of yet, but that's an area where I think there's a lot of exciting developments to come. The world of point solutions are kind of like very standard interfaces that every sales rep across every company uses. I think that is increasingly going away and becoming much more customized, similar to actually to how data enrichment has become a much more customized thing that each company does a little bit differently. So those are two areas where I think I would stay tuned, and those are areas that I'm really excited about, kind of talking with customers and thinking about what Clay is going to build towards the end of this year and into next year.
Okay, that's awesome. So for our viewers, and if somebody wants to get deeper into these topics and these subjects, where should they find some more info and best info that is out there?
Yeah, honestly, I feel like my LinkedIn is pretty good. You can message me
Okay.
on LinkedIn, connect with me on LinkedIn. That's
Yeah.
kind of a place where you can get like one-on-one, responses to things.
Yeah.
But actually, we've done a lot of work for Clay as well. If you go to clay.com/university, there's courses, templates. There's actually a cohort program that you can join with other Clay users that are trying to, get into the tool and so forth. There's Clay clubs, which are physical meetups that occur all around the world, like Stockholm, Bangalore, Dubai, Los Angeles. They're in every city. And then there also is this community Slack. So clay.com/Slack. You can join that. There's about 20,000 members in that Slack. Lots of discussion that happens, and we continue to invest in that Slack community quite a bit. So those are all places where you can, where folks and listeners can kind of dig in more. And then of course I also try really hard to be responsive to folks on LinkedIn, send them interesting information, and sort of keep my own feed stocked with interesting content and sort of how we're thinking about go-to-market engineering.
Okay, that's awesome. So definitely I'm connecting with you and going through your feed.
Please
So
do.
yeah. So again, thanks a lot. I truly appreciate your time and effort. And we'll take some time to process this and upload it, and we'll let you know so you can share it with your community also. Again, I truly enjoyed our conversation.
Yeah, I love it. Thanks so much, Saad,
Thank
and
you.
appreciate the chance to speak with you, and looking forward to the publication of all this.
Okay. Okay.
All right, thanks.
Have a
Bye.